Well, basically, what I do have is this B2B marketing case study what they published. So if you could maybe in your own words describe it, not going into very detail, but describe what happened in the campaign.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So we were engaged by an existing client, a company called Thunderhead, and Thunderhead are a customer communication management software company, which sounds quite grand, but basically what they do is essentially banks and insurers have a lot of correspondence that they need to communicate with their customers. So that might be the bills, it might be the statements, it might be ongoing loan agreements, but it's how do they manage that? And a lot of them traditionally have used paper to do that. So it's all about volumes of printing lots of paper, sending that out to people. But what we do know is consumers have changed and they want to be engaged in lots of different ways now. They want to receive it using their mobile phone. They want to receive stuff using their laptop, so email, web, social media even. So what Thunderhead have done is essentially develop software that allows banks and insurers to communicate those pieces of correspondence with customers using the customer's preferred channel, and also to personalize that to a high degree so that based on the language, based on what they know about that customer and their interests, their profile and demographics, they can target and tailor offers to those people as well. So Thunderhead engaged us with a view to actually wanted to grow their business. So they wanted to drive demand for their services in the insurance and banking community. That's in the UK and what they describe as a dark region, so that's Germany, Austria and Switzerland primarily. Now, what we do know about that software is it's quite an expensive purchase. It's got a ticket value of around $350,000 upwards, essentially. So it requires a fair bit of investment, but the return that companies get is very strong. But what we needed to do is we needed to reach a number of different individuals within each of the organisations we were targeting. So we know that people would buy not only in IT, but also in the marketing function, also in the customer services function, the compliance function, and what we describe as, I suppose, the line of business. So these are the people who may head up a loan operation, a mortgage operation, and so on and so forth. But each of the people we were targeting have a different requirement as to how they would use this software. So what was really key was we could tailor the message depending on who their audience is. But what we did know is, because of what Thunderhead do, is we really need to personalise our message and deliver it using the channel they're choosing, really. So how do you take a brand that people don't really know and get that brand in front of people and get them noticed? So we developed this, what we describe as the I Am campaign, which was a highly integrated, very, very targeted and tailored, primarily a direct marketing program to reach these people. Basically, the construct of the campaign was we did a lot of work in terms of the data profiling. What was really key is to understand who these individuals were and what their motives and drivers were. So 6 weeks of intensive data capture ensued in terms of gathering that data. And also at the same time as doing that, we were developing the message. So we were looking at, well, what are the big issues in banking and insurance at the moment? What are the big issues for the individuals we're targeting? And even down to some of the companies we were targeting as well, as looking at some of the things that they were stating in their company reports and news articles about what their priorities were, and looking at how we could tailor the message into those individuals as well. So we developed the messaging for the campaign and actually validated that with a number of subject matter experts, so independent experts in the industry, just to check the messaging was resonate as well. Then we took that messaging and needed to put that into a engaging, creative kind of format as such. And we developed this kind of concept called the I Am campaign. And I Am was meant to be an intriguing way of showing how Thunderhead could help them address a certain number of issues in a certain way. So it was really flexible. So I am your way to get close to your customers. I am the way to drive out costs. I am your way to target new offers more effectively. So it was a really flexible, creative construct that could work, and we could flex it depending on the language, depending on the message, which is really good. We then looked at the different tactics we would use as part of the campaign. As part of the data gathering exercise, we'd also look to identify what we describe as the gatekeepers in those organisations. So the people who really looked after these executives. So we're talking to the executive assistants, the personal assistants to some of these individuals, identify who they were. And what we were really keen to do is communicate with those people to get their buy-in prior to actually sending the senior executives something. So we developed just some simple postcards, which were nice and elegant, personalised to that individual, which we sent to the gatekeeper in advance, just forewarning them that a parcel was coming for that target individual. The individual then received a very, very nice tailored direct marketing pack. So the top tier received this nice box. Intriguing. They open it up. Now I haven't actually got the device inside which was in there, but they had a booklet which was personalised to them, and underneath that was an iPod Shuffle. On the iPod Shuffle was a 60-second podcast recording with a kind of a nice message about Thunderhead in there, saying what Thunderhead could do for them, and also about some references to some of the clients who were already using it. This mail pack then had a personalised URL which drove the individual to a landing page, which on the landing page, again, that was designed to deliver a personalised web experience. We'd aggregated content that Thunderhead already had around sort of white papers, around some of the thought leadership assets, podcasts, videocasts, case studies on that site, which it was very easy for people to access that, to view those things and get some more value out of that. Because we knew who they were from a personalised URL, it meant we didn't have to do any data capture at that stage. We knew who those individuals were. Those landing pages were actually backed by a marketing automation system, Eloqua, which meant that we had a high degree of sort of intelligence as to who these people were and what they were actually viewing as well. So we could say, well, actually, that target individual visited these pages, downloaded these assets, which meant that the salespeople who were then following up knew exactly the areas of interest for that individual based on what they'd, so say for instance, they were more interested in the compliance documents. That then led to a kind of a conversation that was more geared around the compliance issue that Thunderhead helps address as well. So that was the sort of tier 1 target. Then for tier 2, which was a slightly cheaper piece, or more cost-effective piece, I should say. This was the second pack we sent to individuals, and this was around, we actually have the example here, a nice coffee pot with some coffee beans in there. You get the aroma when you open it. This was actually personalised to the individual. I'm a refreshing change. You get the booklet here. Within the booklet, looking at some of the issues they face, the ways that Thunderhead could help, and ultimately it would deliver a personalised URL here. So very nice kind of elegant design, very simple for them to get the message, and again, driving through to the personalised URL. Those were going into the senior executives. Each one of the booklets was tailored to the individual based on their profile. And then at an operational level, for some of the kind of people slightly lower down the food chain who we knew were key influencers, we targeted with a series of postcards and emails. So on a weekly basis, they would receive a highly personalised postcard and an email, which again was driving them through to personalised landing pages. So aim was to really take individuals on this journey, so this kind of intriguing piece which really engaged them. Then they would visit the campaign landing pages, and basically as soon as they completed their visit to the site, it would trigger an email to the salesperson, the appropriate salesperson, to then follow up that individual. And the ideal would be they would follow up within 48 hours on that phone call. Now what we found were, because people had received this piece, it was very memorable, people were much more accommodating in terms of taking the call from the salesperson. The salesperson could reference this in the call. They said, oh yeah, you're the guys who sent us the iPod Shuffle or coffee pot, great, very interested in hearing what you've got to say. So it's almost disarming them with a really nice piece. The salesperson had got some insight into what their areas of interest from the microsite and where they'd been, which meant that they could then more likely to secure a meeting really on the back of that. At the same time as this activity was going on, what we did recognise was Thunderhead was a brand that these organisations might not know very well. So we created a video based on some of the research that Thunderhead had commissioned with YouGov. And that was looking at what we describe as disconnected customer. And that was looking at some of the customer attitudes to the way banks and insurers were engaging them through their communications. So some really useful research that would be of interest to these individuals. And the reason we created the video was the fact we really wanted to bring the statistics and the research to life. and present that in an engaging way. And that was seeded across social media, so that we were getting the content out there, the message, in areas that these people would look. So targeting some of the influencers in that community to try and get them to pick up on their blogs, raising the profile through search as well, so that people really were getting familiar with Thunderhead brand as an expert in the customer communication arena at the same time. So hopefully having this media multiplier effect, so that the brand familiarity, the combination of the engagement as well, would mean they'd be more receptive to a conversation, which ultimately would lead to an opportunity for Thunderhead to meet with them and hopefully secure some business on the back of it. In terms of the effectiveness of the campaign, anecdotally, some really well received by the individuals who received the communications. Similarly, that translates into actual direct business opportunities. The return on the campaign was estimated to be 110 to 1, just to give an indication of the value they got off the back of that. It was initially focused on the EMEA region. However, Thunderhead globally have picked up on the campaign, so it's now been delivered in the US and also in Asia Pacific as well. And basically, I think what was important was the campaign was so thoroughly planned and the messaging so thought through and refined and targeted and tailored, but it was also a model that could be reused again and again for future campaigns. So that is Thunderhead I Am.
Great. It's to me it seems like the beauty of it really lies in integration. So you basically used all kind of media, starting with old-fashioned direct mail, email, personalized URL, and then telemarketing and social media. So it's really a very integrated campaign.
Yeah, and I think that's really key these days, is you can't necessarily rely on any one channel. People often say, well, you're still doing direct mail, but direct mail's dead, isn't it? People want to receive stuff digitally these days. But what we knew is actually trying to email these people when there's no relationship there. One, it's impossible often, and two, you're restricted by legislation. In some countries, they don't allow unsolicited email. And three, it's just not good practice. It's not well received, and it's likely to be ignored. So we needed to really find a way we could get through to those individuals and get our message in front of them. And we found direct marketing, very personalised, was the smart way to do that. But it's a combination of then how do we build that relationship and convert that into a digital relationship. So driving people online where we can start to build that engagement. So future communications can be digital because we've got that permission. We've had that reason to engage already. So it's great when you take that sort of analog relationship and move it online, because it's more cost effective moving forward, and we can get much more insight then into how people are interacting with us through the pages they kind of engage with as well. So it gives us more insight into those individuals.
I believe that it might be very difficult to collect data on these people because they don't want to be public. They often, are, especially decision makers, are hidden behind all kind of gatekeepers.
Yes.
So to know the name and all the addresses and everything, and exact job responsibility of a particular high-level banker, I think it's very complicated task. How did you collect the data, and how good the database actually was?
So we worked very closely with Thunderhead on this and identified who the target organisations were they were looking to pursue. Now, we went initially to some external data brokers to try and find those people, but we found that the quality of data was poor for those very reasons. However, what Thunderhead had was an inside sales team who were very good at making some calls into those organisations, building some relationships with the receptionists, the gatekeepers, to actually start to say, could you provide us with the details of this person? Well, in addition to that, we also used social media. So we looked at LinkedIn profiles. So LinkedIn is a very good tool for doing that. Generally speaking, people will keep their CVs up to date on there, so you get a really good insight into who those people are. Similarly, you see people who are at conferences and check out sort of the people who are speaking at these events, but generally they've got their profiles on there. So it's, again, you can look for this data, it's all over the place, but it's a case of once you've got that data, before we communicated with them, was making a call into those people just to validate they were there, they were still in that role, they were still the appropriate person for us to talk to. Just because this is a high value pack, it costs money to produce, we didn't want the wastage there, so it always pays to just make sure you've got that data absolutely correct.
How these people, do they feel like, probably it's different in different cultures, but I believe like in Scandinavia, for example, this might be inappropriate. They would feel that this is kind of a bribe or something.
Yeah, you've got to be very careful, and I think we've used this mechanism several times in several different countries, and the response varies. It helps if there is already the brand awareness around that organisation. So, for instance, if it's a well-respected brand, they don't necessarily see it as a bribe. We were very careful as well to look at the value of the pack we were sending. So it has a perception of value, but we're using with the case of the iPod Shuffle, the medium is actually used to communicate the message. So actually it feels like it's not excessive in its, and it's interesting, I think there were only 1 or 2 instances where people said they couldn't take it, couldn't receive it. So I think you've got to be really careful. Something like the coffee pot, I think we're seen not necessarily seen as a bribe, it was just a kind of novel way. People thought that was quite a charming way of engaging them. So whenever you're creating these sorts of things, you just got to be very mindful of that, but it's a very good point.
What about personalized URLs? How many different versions you have? Was there a personalized for each and every of the recipient?
So we'd identified, I think it was 6 different types of role overall in an organisation. They were, I think, just off the top of my head, that was marketing, it was IT, it was compliance, it was what we described as line of business market facing. So people had a market facing role in let's say they were head of mortgages, and then we had line of business back office, which were more the sort of back office processing side as well, and also the customer services function. So what we'd done is we'd identified sort of profiles, and we knew what individuals who fit those profiles were likely to be engaged by in terms of the messaging. So, and also then we did it by sector. So retail banks had a different message to those who were in property and casualty insurance, to those in life insurance. So it worked out, I think there were about at least 18 different permutations of the site ultimately. And each of them had just a kind of personalised by company name and individual's name as well on the site. So lots of different permutations. I think we were fortunate in using a system like Eloquent, although it's incredibly complex, it allows for a high degree of tailoring. But it pays.
Tell me a bit more about you mentioned that after the campaign, or as a second phase, you had social media there. I didn't quite understand exactly what did you do there.
Oh, okay, so this was actually running at the same time of the campaign, and the social media effort was really around the distribution of some really high value content. So Thunderhead had already commissioned some research with a company called YouGov, and that research was focused on looking at how customer attitudes really to how their banks and insurers were engaging them. So how are they communicating with you today? Do you feel like they're personalising that and really care about your account for the way they're communicating with you? What would good communications look like? All those sort of questions. The research was interesting in the kind of findings, so we wanted to really bring that to life. So they did the traditional, here's some reports on the back of that. They did some traditional PR around the back of it, but we said, look, to really get that out there from our own experience of doing these kind of things, we said, let's turn this into a kind of a bite-sized video. And we branded the research Disconnected Customer to give it a theme, and then seeded that out using Twitter, using LinkedIn, targeting influential bloggers in the community, and really it was just to amplify our message. So we got the video picked up by a number of different sites, so these individuals we were targeting would likely to stumble across that research independently, and also via search. So that it's the marriage of the two, of seeing Thunderhead in the association with these guys are experts in what's going on out there around customer communications, and then receiving something which is telling them about their service and solution are in this space as well. We found that combination to be very powerful.
In terms of telemarketing, how much these people who call, the salespeople, actually knew about the behavior of the target audience? So did they know exactly that on that particular day they received a package, then they visited this personalized URL, and what exactly they did on that website, how long time they spent, what kind of content they looked at? So
that's exactly, we've set up reporting using a marketing automation system, so that it was a combination of, they knew exactly when the direct mail piece had landed, They knew exactly when somebody had delivered, been to their personalised URL. They knew which assets on the site that individual had interacted with, which ones they'd downloaded, and also time on site. So, but I think the important thing was which assets and pages has that person spent time on, because that gives you real insight into generally their areas of interest, which could then really use to tailor the conversation they were having with those individuals as well.
So basically all telemarketing conversations were based on the user behavior on the website.
I'd like to, hopefully the majority of them were. They should have been, yes.
But how do people feel, let's say, if salesperson calls you and says, I know that you visited our website this morning for 15 minutes?
No, well, yeah, you've got to be, obviously the way we work with the sales was to be very careful about how they'd use that information. So clearly nobody wants to be targeted with that kind of, we're seeing what you're doing, here you go. But it's just being intelligent about the way you steer a conversation. So we're calling from Thunderhead, you've hopefully received our direct mail piece in the last few days and visited our website. Just want to talk for you through how we could potentially help, maybe in the areas of compliance. Would that be of interest to you? It's being clever about how they use that information. So yeah, nobody wants to say you visited that page for 14 minutes today. So yeah, be clever about the information. I think the important part to make here is people often talk about divide between marketing and sales. And what we were really keen to do was actually get sales involved in the campaign planning process very early on. So the salespeople were very aware as what the campaign was doing, the messaging of the campaign, and what their role would be at various stages. So they could see where marketing would hand over to sales. So, and because of that, we got the buy-in very early. It was just much more seamless than previous campaigns I've done with other clients, where marketing kind of ultimately pass the leads to sales, but sales just aren't bought into the campaign. And I think that's really important with any campaign, is how do you get sales on board right from the start?
Okay. Well, these kind of people, especially high level, like a senior management level in banks, these people probably are very resistant to all kind of marketing messages. Their attention span is extremely short, so that probably even if they open a package or open an email, it doesn't mean that they kind of really get it or read it. So how can you actually make sure that these people you target, they really pay attention to what you want to say?
Yeah. I think the personalisation is really important. First of all, I think we at Earnest, we really think about these people say business decision makers are very rational, and actually they're humans. At the end of the day, they're just like me and you. So what actually we find charming, what we find engaging, they'll find engaging as well. And this is where business-to-business communications goes wrong a lot of the time, because they think, oh, okay, we must show pictures of people at computers because that's what these people are like. They're very serious. They're making very rational decisions. It's all about money for them. It's not, at the end of the day, there's a lot of different factors at play. How do you tune into both those the rational side of the whole complexity of that decision-making cycle, but also play to the emotive side as well? So sending something which has actually got, they open a box and they can smell the coffee. That's just that you've got them engaged from the start, and combining that with the level of personalisation we had and making the message a little bit intriguing as well. You've got them, and to actually flick through it, we're not putting too much onus on them. There's not a huge amount of messaging in that booklet. They can flick through it very readily. If it's not right for them, we've heard of them passing it on to other colleagues within the team. Often they take it home for their wife or kids. So interestingly enough, it does get used, the piece. So, but it's just about disarming them. It's what they're not expecting is to open the box and find an iPod Shuffle Insider, to find a coffee pot in there. So that's what's really nice about the campaign.
Okay. Well, I think I have the last one now. What's your view on email in B2B? Because you said it doesn't work very well as a first communication point, because it's very often ignored and not perceived as something important. But what's your view on email? In what occasions it does work, and also two questions in one is that very often, you know, there's a debate that how long or how thorough the email message really should be, because very often people don't read more than just 3 lines. And on the other hand, you want to say, you know, especially if you have such a complex product as a new software, you can't really, you know, describe it in 3 sentences.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting one. We get asked this a lot. I think email as a first approach doesn't work necessarily. I think it can work if it's a matter of 3 or 4 lines and it's come from an individual. So let's say it's a salesperson who's put together a very, very nice email to that individual. It's just 4 lines, which is very clear in terms of its expression of the value and what the intent of the individual is there. Okay, that can work in some circumstances. The issue is it's unsolicited. It's not necessarily a brand they know. So in those circumstances, we probably advise against it. Unless you've got, it's not necessarily the right way to build a relationship. I think, but once you've actually built permission, you've met somebody, or you've sent them something in advance, you've had a phone conversation, I think that's where email can then start to really work. But people have got to be very, very careful about that email communication. And what people don't, even you've got a relationship with somebody, you send them long emails and you send them in kind of HTML, they may look great, but people might never read them. I get 20 odd of these emails a day, and 1 or 2 I might glance through, the other ones just go straight in my sort of delete box. So it's kind of like, I think email, you've got to be really careful about how you do it. You've got, as soon as you get a reputation for having boring emails, well, people just don't read them. So, and also think about the devices people are reading these things on. A lot of the time I'm reading my emails on my iPhone these days, or it might be BlackBerry, somebody's reading them on. They're not necessarily reading them on a desktop computer. So all those fancy graphics, unless you've got responsive design in that email, that means that it looks great on the iPhone or BlackBerry, then it's just wasted, absolutely wasted. And also think about, I'm reading my emails on an iPhone, I don't want to read really, really long emails, so keep it short and concise. I've got to be really clear what the intent of the sender is.
Okay, so I'm glad you replied to our email.
Yes, yeah.